That was somebody else. Yeah, he was, Kennard was arrested on trumped-up charges, planted, fake charges, for chicken feed, which is like a joke, and he could have made that up, and some liquor too they planted on him. And he came down with cancer and was released, towards the end of his life. But of course, wasn't getting treatment. Yeah, it's and yet Meredith was at the Ole Miss game this weekend. I haven't had as long as his hands. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's you wouldn't know that except for having Meredith tell the story. So, and that's really the point. Here's some more. These are good. Fred Clark on Meredith. Fred Clark's an actor.
I was really proud of him, but I just could not imagine him having the guts to do that. Putting himself on the block out there and all the policemen and clowns, everybody want to kill him. He was a man that had nerve to scale. He never seemed like he was scared of nothing. He always carried the same personality all the time. And this kind of encouraged me to stay into the movement, to stay abreast. There was a stillness in the air. There was fear. You could taste it during the time he was trying to go to Ole Miss. We were scared for him. We should have been afraid of just ourselves because he had police everywhere he went, back and forth to the campus.
Yeah, but it meant something to him. Meredith's example meant something to Clark. Here's some great clips from Fannie Lou Hamer talking about what it was like right at the beginning when she first encountered some SNCC workers and was kind of beginning to learn. And she's well known. Probably one of the most famous Mississippians to emerge at this time. But she grew up and lived in Ruralville, R-U-L-V-I-L-L-E, which you might know, up in Sunflower County, still a pretty quiet place. And, it was a sharecrop family.
Well, I didn't know anything about voting. I didn't know anything about registering to vote. And one night I went to the church and they had a mass meeting, and I went to the church and they talked about, how it was our right that we could register and vote. And they were talking about we could vote out people that we didn't want in office. We thought it wasn't right that we could vote them out. And that sounded interesting enough to me that I wanted to try, because I had never heard until 1962 that black people could register and vote. We hadn't heard anything about registering and vote because it used to be this flat land in here. When people would get out of the fields, if they had a radio, they'd be too tired to play it, So we didn't know what was going on in the rest of the state, much less in other places. I never even heard that was in the Constitution. I never heard anything about it. In fact, the first time I was aware that Mississippi had a Constitution was when I tried to register to vote, and they gave me a section of the Constitution in Mississippi to write, to copy, and then to give a reasonable interpretation of it. I didn't know that, that we had that right.
That's the Delta means a lot of things to people, and to people outside of Mississippi, often the Delta stands for not only Mississippi but the entire South. But I've always heard in that little excerpt, me personally, it's one of the most powerful descriptions of what the Delta really was. Just kind of isolation and labor, and in just some few words, she expresses that. It's really very powerful. A couple others. Just take our time here. These are the things. And people will tell you stories. They'll tell you these stories. Not everybody has to be famous to tell you these stories.
And the landowner drove up and asked him had I made it back. And he told him I had. And I got him walked out on the porch. And he told me to tell me what he said. And I told him he said, well, I mean that. You'll have to go down and withdraw your registration and you'll have to leave this place. And I didn't call myself saying nothing smart, but I couldn't understand it, and I answered in the only way I could and told him that I didn't go down there to register for him. I went down there to register for myself, and this seemed like it made me mad. I told him that. I had to leave that same night.
That's the landowner of her, of the plantation, telling her that she had to go. Just one more.
The first vote I cast the first vote for myself because I was running for Congress. That was in 1964.
Just like some of you might know the story of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which in 1964 set itself up as a parallel political organization to the regular or mainline Democratic Party, which then still practiced exclusion through the poll tax, the literacy test, and those other devices to limit the franchise, not just to African Americans, but actually a lot of poor whites didn't vote for the same reasons. Not being able to read was, because of poor schooling and not having the money to pay the poll tax because you were poor. Those were pretty widely held conditions across the state. But that's what she's referring to there. I'm going to skip ahead here to Johnny Balser. We're here in Macomb. Johnny Balser, who only recently passed away, was a longtime Macomb, Illinois Central. Huh?
It's his brother.
Oh, it's his brother. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Yeah, okay. I was talking to somebody and I think I must have misunderstood. But he worked for the Illinois Central Railroad for a long time and sat for an interview about 6 years ago. More than that, actually. 2003, I think is when it was. So he talks about his experience. He served also in World War II. And these are just wonderful.
When I followed him, he says, you're going to go on the railroad. I had other things I was going to go do. You're going to the railroad. Well, when I went for the railroad, I got 2 years. I got my apprenticeship on all the machines. And then, of course, the war came along. And I went into the Army. And when I went to Camp Shelby, they asked me what I did in civilian life. And I said, I was a machinist apprentice. And they said, would you like to do that in the Army? I said, I think I would. So they sent me to an ordnance company in North Carolina, Fort Bragg, and found out that those 2 years were adequate, more than adequate for what I was doing in the Army. We were deep into Germany and a lot of mud and a lot of truck stop stuff. We had a wrecker in the outfit that went out and rescued those. He broke the gear off of one of his wrecker vehicles. He says, can you make a gear? I said, yeah, I can make a gear, but we don't have the equipment to make the gear. And the captain said, well, we were in the German factory this morning at Fort Bragg. And Metz says, did you see any machines in there that could make a gear? I said, absolutely. Well, go get you about 6 men and get it. So we went down, got that, brought it back, mounted it in the back of a truck, took those old metric gears we didn't have. Ours are American, and they couldn't find a piece of steel big enough to make it with. So it took the old gear, had it welded up, took that little machine, cut those 2 teeth out, and it lasted to the end of the war.
So, they're fixing equipment, in this case a wrecker, but the next excerpt is really interesting. The Battle of the Bulge, a little bit of background, and it was deep in the winter, it was a very cold winter, and they had this artillery, and the traverse mechanisms on some of the guns are breaking due to the cold, improperly annealed steel, and the like. And so he repairs those. Let me just get this.
During the cold weather, which was 17 degrees, they would shoot these 105 howitzers, and it had a reverse mechanism. You crank, go this way, that way, and so forth. It batted. And when they fired those guns, it crystallized and broke that stuff out, and it wouldn't crank. So we made a tack to go through that and clear it out. The thing about the little machine we had wouldn't go down to 3 threads to the inch. Ours went down to 4, but wouldn't go to 3. Well, we rearranged the gears and made it 3 and gave it to the guy in the artillery station, go try this. He came back that same day holding that tap like this. He said, save this and keep it in your truck. So you hear those guns shooting? I said, yeah, it's been that way all morning. He said, if it wasn't for this, you wouldn't have heard that. And those are the guns that softened up the other side of the Rhine so we could cross. So that railroad experience, it directly affected the war.
It's a powerful story. We talked about genealogy earlier. This is one of my most favorite interviews. Now these are all just excerpts that I've taken, or other in our staff have taken from longer interviews. So yeah, there's much more to this, but time is. This is a Lunette Gore. She sat for an interview in 2008. She talks about her family. She's from outside of Wall.
My father was born a slave, but he was not old enough to serve as a slave. They were freed when he was quite a child. So when the slaves was freed, my grandmother remained with the master as a paid person, and of course she raised her family on the master's farm. Then when my daddy got old enough, he immigrated down in Jones County and there remained.
Just one more about it.
In sharecropping, they'd always give you a plot as a sharecropper, but the Jill farm was on as for the Jill farm. The person that you shared with, they would make what you call a run, and they would open an account for you at a store, and you would get your food and supplies from that store. Well, if at the end of the year you didn't eat up everything that the farm produced as cash, like sell bills of cotton or corn, if you didn't overrun your run, you got some cash. If you overran it, you got no cash.
Well, that just fortunately, I don't think anybody earns their living this way, at least in Mississippi or the South. But it's a powerful, description of what was once the predominant way in which folks earned their living. So, I have so many. We could be here for hours and hours. William Winter talking about the black market tax, which was, while Mississippi enacted prohibition after the natural prohibition was dispensed with, we still had like a back door, so people in the river counties on the coast could have their whiskey. And they taxed it. So it's an interesting little story there, but he describes that. Before we talk about how to develop a project, I'm curious to hear from you. Does any of this sound like it's something that you could implement with your students? And if so, do you have any ideas that have come to you that maybe have been touched on and will be listened to, or just that you thought? Yes, sir.
Well, I'm trying to include oral history. I have a student doing a National History Day project on Robert Johnson, and I'm trying desperately to find some way to get him an interview with B.B. King to see the influence that Robert Johnson had on B.B. King through an oral history or an oral interview with King. We're trying to define different ways to get that done now, but I'm heavily trying to get other aspects or other people for him to interview to try to base it majorly oral, because the judges like to see it because it has a different perspective than just reading out of the book.
Yeah. Yeah, now B.B. King's a tough guy to pin down. But
I'll shoot for the stars kind of thing.
Where, what school do you teach at? Where's your, and here, yeah. You have a fallback?
I have heard that there is a blues musician based either in Liberty or Summit that has played some over the country with some different musicians that's older and may have some credibility as far as the interview goes. So we're going to pursue that here shortly and see if I can't find out who he is, get in touch with him.
Yeah. You walk that back a step, and I mean, really what you're interested in is the history of music in Mississippi. And so maybe the connection between B.B. King and Robert Johnson may or may not. Bill Ferris has a huge, about 3 years ago, came out with an extensive series of interviews with B.B. King, which I think appeared in a journal called Southern Cultures, and maybe not. And I skipped through it, but I can't recall, if that issue was addressed.
Bessie Jackson, I had it, he's originally from McCall.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he's from
I
McCall.
didn't know that. Okay.
Blues guy.
Yeah, he's good. He's very good.